Welcome everyone. Today we are going to learn about basic facts on plasma membrane. In my previous videos I have discussed that the first important fact about plasma membrane we have to remember is that all biomembranes are chemically lipid in nature and these lipids are bilayer in structure. So there are two layers of lipids present, so that's why we call lipid bilayer, and also proteins are present. This is the basic architecture of the membrane. Now in this video I will talk about other basic facts. The second important fact or point we have to remember about the plasma membrane is that all membranes, or actually plasma membranes, acts as permeability barrier. Acts as permeability. It acts as permeability barrier. Now what does it mean? That means the membranes are actually prevents the unassisted movement of most water soluble molecules. Now why most water soluble molecules are not permeable? Because in my previous video I have mentioned that lipids are actually non-polar in nature and waters are polar in nature. So polar and non-polar do not mix. So that's why most of the water soluble molecules are not permeable through the membrane. That's why it acts as a permeability barrier. What is the function of this permeability barrier? As the membrane acts as a permeability barrier, it actually maintains characteristic biochemical difference between inside and outside of the cell. Not only that, it also maintains the difference between the organelles and the cytoplasm. I have mentioned that in my previous video that most of the intracellular organelles in the eukaryotic cells like nucleus, endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi complex, mitochondria, chloroplast, endosome, lysosome, peroxisome, all these intercellular organelles are also surrounded by membranes, and this membranes also acts as a permeability barrier so that the content or the chemical composition of the organelles differ from the cytoplasm. And also it is true for the plasma membrane because it actually acts as a permeability barrier, so the inside of the cell or the cytoplasm is chemically different from the outside or environment. So second important point is it acts as a permeability barrier. Now few molecules are actually permeable through the plasma membrane and few are not. So let me write down which molecules are permeable, which are not. Like gases like oxygen, carbon dioxide, nitrogens are permeable. So they are permeable. Okay. Permeable through the membrane. Like small uncharged molecules, small uncharged polar molecules like ethanol are permeable. Also water and urea are slightly permeable, not completely but slightly permeable. Now large uncharged polar molecules like glucose, fructose, etc. are not permeable. So they are not permeable. And all ions, it could be cations or anions like calcium or magnesium or H plus, any ions or negative ions like chlorine, they are not permeable. They are also not permeable. And charged, they are uncharged. Now charged polar molecules like charged polar molecules like ATP and amino acids, also nucleic acids, they are not permeable. So some molecules are permeable like gases, small uncharged polar molecules like ethanol, water and urea are slightly permeable, but many molecules, polar molecules like large that the size of the molecule is large, so it cannot penetrate through the lipid bilayer. So large uncharged polar molecules like glucose fracture is not permeable. All ions, that means all charged molecules, are actually not permeable, and also the charged polar molecules are not permeable. As plasma membrane are actually permeable, few molecules are permeable and few are not. That's why plasma membrane is called semi-permeable membrane. Semi-permeable membrane. Okay. Now the third important point about plasma membrane, we have to remember that membranes are not rigid in structure. They are not rigid. They are not rigid in structure. They can bend and flex. So they can bend and flex. So let me explain. Now if you take a sheet of bilayer in an aqueous solution, that means this layer is actually bilayer is surrounded by water molecules. The free edges present in the bilayer interacts with the water, and this is energetically unfavorable. And this membrane has an intrinsic property. It actually seals itself. It has a self-sealing property and make a shield compartments, and it is actually fundamental to the creation of life. Now as membranes are flexible, they can deform during the locomotion of cells like amoeba or macrophage. As you can see, during the locomotions, the leading edge of the cells shows undulating ruffle structure. These are ruffle structure. These are actually deformable structure of membranes. And during also cell divisions or cleavage, fertilized egg or cleavage of fertilized egg, membrane deformities occur. If you zoom, you will find that membrane deformities actually happens. Another important fact about plasma membrane is mobility of lipids. Mobility of lipids and proteins in the plasma membrane. In 1970, fluid mosaic model was proposed, and the term fluid is because of this mobility of the lipids and proteins. Now lipids show 4 different types of movements. Lipids in the plasma membrane show 4 different types of movement. One is lateral diffusion. Second is rotation. Third is flexion. And fourth is flip-flop movement. These 4 different movements are performed by lipids in the plasma membrane. Now let me explain. Let's suppose this is the lipid molecules present in the plasma membrane. Now these lipids can move in any directions. Let's suppose this is the layer or outer layer or inner layer, any layer of the plasma membrane. Now these lipids can move in any directions, and this is called lateral diffusions. Now when these lipid molecules rotate around their axis, this is called rotations. Flexion means the fatty acids actually gets apart. That means it can stretch the fatty acids, so the length actually changes between the 2 fatty acids. So this is flexion. And flip-flop means when lipid molecules actually jump from one layer, let's suppose this is the outer layer, jump from one layer to another layer, from outer layer to inner or inner layer to outer, we call it flip-flop. So lipids molecule in the plasma membrane shows 4 different movements: lateral diffusions, rotations, flexion, and flip-flop. Protein can also show different movements. Let me write here. Proteins in the plasma membrane show 3 different types of movement. One is free diffusion. This is very similar to the lateral diffusion of lipid molecules. Second is partial confinement. And third is directed motion. So I will talk about this all movements of the proteins in more details in other videos. One thing you have to remember that proteins never show this type of movement flip-flop. Another important basic fact about plasma membrane, this is my last point I want to mention, that is dynamic property of membranes. It can show budding and fusion. Budding and fusion. Let me explain. When virus is coming out from infected cells, it forms bud-like structure. Also, during the secretion of vesicles from the Golgi bodies or Golgi complex, vesicles are actually secreted out, so budding occurs, and sperm and eggs can fuse, so plasma membrane fusion can also occurs.